book lovers, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about tracking down how much I read in a week, how many hours I spend reading in a week, how many hours it takes me to read a book or listen to an audiobook. So for the past week, I've been using an app called Basmo, who I have partnered up with, who is sponsoring this video, to track and log how much I read every day. It was a pretty enlightening experience. I've never been the type to track down how much I read in a week, to see exactly how much time I spend reading a book. I would literally just read and listen to my audiobooks whenever I had the free time. I would say I mostly read in the evenings, like reading an ebook on my Kindle, because I don't really read that much paperbacks, physical copies, because I just read so much faster with ebooks. Plus I love highlighting, and during the day is when I spend most of the time listening to my audiobooks, especially when I walk my dog every morning. I spend like 30 to 40 minutes walking my dog and just listening to audiobooks. And if I'm just doing things around the house, I will more than likely have my AirPods in and will be listening to an audiobook. I listen to my audiobooks at 3 times the speed. It used to be like 2 to 2.5 speed. That was my range for last year in 2020, but I've kind of upped it this year in 2021. I've been slowly increasing my listening speed over the years. I mean, I used to be the type of person who would listen to an audiobook at regular speed, 1x. I listened at that speed for the first few years that I started listening to audiobooks, when I first discovered audiobooks. But now if I even try to listen at 1x speed, I can't stand it. It feels like I'm listening to something in slow-mo, so 3 times the speed for me. Sometimes more if the app will allow it. Unfortunately, Libby, it only goes up to 3 times the speed, and Libby is where I get most of my audiobooks. I borrow them from my library. But going back to how much I read, how much time I spend reading, audiobooks are definitely the fastest for me. I go through audiobooks so quickly, especially since I listen at such a high speed. I know I've gotten quite a few comments about how I'm able to read so much, like my wrap-ups are always so big, and the simplest answer is really audiobooks. When I started using Basmo, I discovered that I generally spend around 3 to 4 hours listening to an audiobook, whereas reading a book, especially an ebook, it'll take me around 5 to 6 hours. So I'll get into the actual analytics of all the books that I read for the past month and how much I spent reading them, but I do want to share with you guys some things about Basmo. I do have a link in my description to download the app. It's free to download and you can use their free plan, or you can also upgrade and pay for their premium subscription. Basmo is like an all-in-one reading app. You can track how much you read, set a yearly reading schedule, schedule in reading sessions. You can create and organize different bookshelves, like a TBR shelf, a shelf for the books that you've read so far this year, things like that. And they also have a really helpful statistics page that is based off on your reading sessions, how much you spend reading. They'll organize your stats for you and tell you how many hours you spend reading in a week, how many books you still need to read per week or per day in order to reach your yearly reading goal. So if you're looking for something that will help you read more, that will encourage you to read more, I would suggest trying out Basmo. When you join, they'll ask you about your reading habits. They'll ask you what your main goal is, like to read more books, to organize your books, save your notes from your books, or achieve your reading goals. They'll ask you how many books you've read over the past year, and I generally read around 300 to 350 books a year. My previous goal when 2021 started was 300, but now that I'm closing in on that number, I read around 275 books. My new goal for the end of the year is 350 books. They'll ask you how much time you spend reading daily, and I definitely read for a couple hours a day. And they'll also ask you when you like to read the most, morning, midday, or evening. I'm an evening reader, and once you answer all of those questions, you can add whatever book that you're currently reading. For me, I'm currently reading my book club, Ravished by Romance, our July book club read, which is A Promise of Fire by Amanda Boucher. This is the first book in the Kingmaker Chronicle series. It's fantasy romance and I have been loving it. It's got a warlord hero who's very alpha and possessive but also really sweet, and a hilarious and sassy heroine, and they just make such a great couple. I'm actually reading the ebook that I borrowed from my library. I do own all 3 books, the whole trilogy in paperback, but I have a feeling that I'll probably continue the rest of the series in ebook. So that's what I'm reading right now, and that's what I've added to my currently reading shelf on Basmo. I'm also reading Neon Gods, but I had to put it down in order to read A Promise of Fire because the live show is coming up. But also, I'm sad to say I'm not really feeling Neon Gods right now. I mean, I'm feeling the exact same way that I did when I first read it, when I got the ARC months ago. It just wasn't really pulling me in. So I'm sad to say I'm not really loving this one. They'll probably finish it right after I finish A Promise of Fire. You can also see the other books that I've read over the past week, the other books that I've added to the app. These are the books that I did reading sessions for and tracked my reading for. And on the goals page, it'll tell you exactly how much you need to read every day in order to reach your yearly reading goal. So for me, it says that I need to read just 28 minutes in order to reach my yearly goal of 300. As long as I read at least a book a week, I'll be able to reach 300. I'm currently at 278 books read so far this year in 2021. They have fun little bar graphs to show how much you read in a month and how many minutes you spend reading each day. And when you want to track how much you read, you just start up a reading session, and that's where you can take little notes. And one of my favorite things is that you can also take a picture of whatever book you're reading, like the page, either the ebook or the paperback. You can take a picture of that page in the reading session, scan the page, and the app will extract the text from it and add it to your notes page. And from then you can delete or highlight things. You can make a fun little quote design out of it. That part was amazing to me. I did it both on a paperback and the Kindle, and both really work. And once you finish up a reading session, you can end it and mark down which page you're on. If you're reading a physical copy or an ebook, you can also mark the percentage, or you can mark down the number of minutes that you read if you're listening to an audiobook. All of these you can also edit within the app, so if you mess up, no big deal. And you can have an unlimited number of reading sessions with the premium subscription. Over the last week, I read a total of 8 books, 4 ebooks and 4 audiobooks. Well, one of the ebooks was a novella, so it didn't take me as long as the rest, but still 8 books in total. And I will admit that this past week was an especially good reading week for me. Most of them were really great reads, and I just couldn't stop reading. I read a ton. I read for a total of 35 hours last week, which was crazy, and I guess that's the whole point of the app, to read more. So I timed all of my reads. I ended up reading about 5 hours a day, and it was a pretty even split between reading in the day and reading at night, because I'll listen to my audiobooks during the day and then read in bed at night. So for my 8 books, I'll start off with my ebooks. The first one that I read was Love Come to Me by Lacey. This one I actually talked about in my last video, where I read Lisa Kleypas's very first published books that most of them are out of print, and also compared them to her newest release, her newest 2021 release. So this one is a historical romance. It's like a colonial American romance. It's set right after the Civil War, and I really love this book. This actually took me 5 hours and 38 minutes to read, and it was a total of 400 pages around there. My other Lisa Kleypas read was Give Me Tonight. This one took me a little bit longer to read. I didn't love it as much, so maybe that was why I didn't read it as fast as Love Come to Me. This is another historical romance, but with time travel, which was a lot of fun. And according to the app, it took me over 7 hours to read, 7 hours and 36 minutes. I guess I was just really distracted while I was reading, especially since the book is actually shorter than the last one. It's 383 pages. I also read The Dare by Harley LaRue, which is a novella. It's only 150 pages, and this one took me 2 hours and 25 minutes to read. It's a new adult college romance. It's kinky. There's BDSM, which is like a hit or miss for me. This one was an okay read for me. It was recommended to me a lot, but I just sadly didn't love it as much as everyone else did. And the last ebook that I read was Dream a Little Dream by Susan Elizabeth Phillips. This is part of a series, a contemporary romance series that I've been slowly making my way through. It's a single mom romance published back in the late 90s, and it actually read fairly well. It definitely, for me, read better than the earlier books in the series. This one took me about the same time that it took me to read Love Come to Me by Lisa Kleypas. It took me actually a minute less than that one at 5 hours and 37 minutes, and it was about the same length, 404 pages. So those were how long it took me to read ebooks. Audiobooks for me, obviously, I go through a lot faster, a lot quicker. Song of the Forever Rains by E.J. Mello, which is a fantasy romance. It was an okay read for me. I kind of expected a little bit more from this fantasy romance, but it took me 4 hours and 16 minutes to get through this audiobook. Signal Boost by Alyssa Cole is an post-apocalyptic romance. This one was a lot shorter, so it took me 2 hours and 48 minutes. 40 Love by Olivia Dade is a tennis romance. We've got a former professional tennis player for a hero, and there's a bit of an age gap as well with an older heroine and a younger hero. This was a fun contemporary. It took me 3 hours and 25 minutes to listen to. And my last read was another Alyssa Cole book, How to Find a Princess. This took me 3 hours and 8 minutes to get through. It's not my favorite from Alyssa Cole. It's an FF romance in her new Royal series, but I think I love her original series a lot more than this new series. So on average, I would say I read for about 5.5 hours for one full-length book. For like a 400-page book, 350 to 400-page book. That's around my speed for an ebook. It's probably a little bit longer if I'm reading a paperback. And my audiobooks took me around 3 to 3.5 hours if I'm listening to 3 times the speed. So this week I read for a total of 35 hours, which I am so shook by. And according to the app, I read about 1.6 pages per minute and 96 pages per hour, but I think this might be a little skewed because of my audiobooks. Before I added all the audiobooks, I was sitting at around a page a minute. So that was how my week of reading went. I doubt I'll read for another 35 hours next week, but if you want to know my thoughts on all of these books, I'll talk about them in my next monthly wrap up. A big thank you to Basmo for sponsoring this video. If you're interested in getting your reading stats while you're reading, be sure to check them out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!